The moment I walked through the door of the restaurant's private dining room, I knew this wasn't just a simple family gathering. The table was too organized, the lights were too harsh and white, and in the center lay a thick binder with documents perfectly aligned next to an elegant fountain pen that wasn't mine. To my right, a man in a suit was already seated with his laptop open. He didn't look at the menu. He looked at me. My daughter-in-law smiled as if everything were normal. "We just came to talk, Mom," she said, but when I saw the word signature flagged on every page, I understood something terrible. Someone had decided I was no longer the owner of my own life. I walked in slowly, clutching my handbag tightly against my chest, as if that gesture could protect me from what was about to happen. The restaurant was one of those quiet, upscale steakhouses where people go to celebrate anniversaries or close major business deals. Soft jazz, sparkling wine glasses, polite silence, too much silence. The guy wearing the gray blazer glanced up for barely a few seconds before returning to his screen. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't have to. I already knew who he was. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, was sitting at the far end of the table, at the head. Her back was straight, her hands clasped calmly, as if she were presiding over a board meeting. Beside her was my son, Michael, with his shoulders hunched and his gaze lost in the white tablecloth. When he saw me, he lifted his head and offered a weak smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Mom, thanks for coming," Jessica said in a sweet voice. "We wanted to talk to you calmly, as a family." The word family hung in the air heavy, uncomfortable. I sat down slowly, never taking my eyes off the binder. From that angle, I could read some of the headings printed in bold: asset transfer agreement, estate management. I felt my throat close up. "And him?" I asked, pointing to the man in the suit. Jessica barely turned her head, as if she had forgotten to introduce him. "Oh, that's Mr. Henderson, our attorney. He's just here to guide us, that's all. Just to guide us." She said it as if it were casual, as if sitting one's mother-in-law in front of a lawyer with documents ready to sign was something people did every day. Michael remained silent. I knew that silence. I had seen it when he was a child and knew something was wrong but didn't dare contradict anyone. "After what happened with Dad," Jessica continued, "we thought it was important to get everything in order to avoid problems down the road. You know, for everyone's well-being. What happened with Dad?" She didn't say your husband's death. She didn't say our grief. She said it like someone discussing a pending administrative task. I felt a sharp pinch in my chest. We had buried him barely a few months ago, and I still woke up some nights reaching for him, forgetting for a few seconds that he was no longer there. Mr. Henderson closed his laptop and pushed the binder toward me with a precise movement. "Ma'am," he said in a rehearsed voice, "what we have here is a family agreement. The idea is to redistribute certain assets so that everyone is covered and there are no conflicts in the future." I opened the binder carefully. The pages smelled of fresh toner. Everything was printed, reviewed, ready. It was obvious they hadn't improvised a thing. My eyes scanned the lines without lingering too long, but I understood enough. They wanted me to sign over the deed to the house, the bank accounts, practically everything my husband had left in my name. "Redistribute?" I asked. "According to whom?" Jessica leaned forward slightly with that expression she used when she wanted to appear empathetic. "Mom, it's not about taking anything away from you, it's just sharing. Michael is your son, and we have responsibilities too. The kids, the future. You're already settled. Already settled. As if my life were already over, as if by passing 60 I no longer had the right to decide. Your dad was always very fair," she added. "I'm sure if he were here, he'd want us to think of the whole family." I felt heat rising up my neck. I thought of my husband, Robert. I thought of how he checked every receipt, how he always told me never to sign anything without reading it twice. I thought of the last conversation we had about the house, about leaving everything clear in case someone tries to confuse you one day. "I'm not signing this," I said finally, my voice low but firm. The shift was immediate. Jessica's smile tightened. Mr. Henderson shifted in his chair. Michael looked up, alarmed. "Mom," my son started to say. "If you don't sign," the lawyer interrupted, "this could get complicated. We'd have to go through legal channels, probate court, long processes, expensive litigation. I don't think you want to go through that." Jessica sighed exaggeratedly. "Nobody wants problems," she said, "but it's also not fair for you to keep everything. People talk, Mom. It wouldn't look good. There they were, the threats disguised as concern, lawsuits, expenses, shame. They looked at me as if I were the selfish one, the stubborn one. I felt my pulse in my ears, but I took a deep breath. I looked around the table, one by one. Jessica, the lawyer, Michael, 2 other people I had barely noticed sitting in the back, observing in silence. I started to count under my breath, then out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They frowned. That's a lot of people, I said slowly. What are you talking about? Jessica asked, annoyed. This isn't a game. For the first time since I entered, I smiled, not a smile of joy, but of calm, of certainty. You're right, I replied. It's not a game. And how curious. I reached into my handbag, took out my phone, and placed it on the table next to the pen they wanted me to use. I brought a person too. At that instant, someone knocked on the private room's door. It opened just a few inches, enough for the hallway light to slice across the white tablecloth like a pale line. The hostess poked her head in and asked if everything was all right. I nodded with a short gesture. Not yet. No, not yet. The door closed again, and the murmur of the restaurant faded away, as if we were isolated inside a glass bubble. While Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Mr. Henderson, my mind drifted years back to when family meant something else, back to when that word wasn't used as currency to buy silence or signatures. I met my husband, Robert, when I was 22 and working as a clerk at a fabric store downtown. He was an accountant at a small firm, one of those places where everyone knows each other by name and pencils are guarded as if they were made of gold. He wasn't a man of grand speeches. He was a man of action. He was a man of checking twice, of keeping receipts in manila envelopes with the date written by hand. He used to say that paper doesn't lie, but people can get confused. We lived a simple life, no luxuries. Our house wasn't big, but it was ours. We painted every wall ourselves. We bought every piece of furniture little by little. When Michael was born, Robert opened a new notebook and wrote "Future" on the first page. In there, he noted everything, from the first hospital bill to the money he set aside just in case. We raised Michael with clear rules and plenty of hugs. He never lacked anything important, but we didn't give him everything he wanted, either. Robert said that learning to wait was a form of self-respect. I taught him to say hello, to look people in the eye, to not talk with his mouth full. We were a normal family, quiet Sundays, early church, long lunches. When Michael brought Jessica home for the first time, I made an effort to receive her with an open heart. She was polite, smiling, one of those people who knows how to say the right thing at the right moment. She helped me set the table, called me Mrs. at first, and then Mom with a naturalness that disarmed me. I thought my son had gotten lucky, but over time, I began to notice small things, details I didn't know how to name. Jessica was always in a hurry, always checking her smartphone. She talked a lot about plans, about growth, about not getting left behind. When Robert spoke of saving, she smiled with patience, as if listening to someone from another era. Things are different now, she would say. You have to move. Invest. Leverage. Robert would nod, but later in the kitchen, he'd tell me in a low voice, moving isn't the same as running blind. They never argued loudly in front of me, but the air grew tense when they talked about money. I felt it on my back like a cold draft. Michael, in the middle, tried to please everyone. He was always like that. He avoided conflict as if it were a disease. When Robert got sick, everything became quieter. Hospitals, appointments, lists. Jessica came by, but always checking her watch. Robert, even while weak, asked me for the documents. Check that everything is in order, he told me one night, his voice tired. Don't sign anything without asking. If you ever feel pressured, don't go alone. I thought he was exaggerating. I thought he was speaking from fear. I didn't imagine those words would stick in my mind like an alarm. Then came his death fast, unfair, a void that isn't filled with flowers or condolences. At the wake, Jessica cried loudly, hugged anyone who let her, spoke of what a good father and husband Robert had been. I watched her from my chair, hands clasped, feeling a dry sadness, without tears. The day after the funeral, she asked me if I had seen the papers yet. Just like that, point blank. She said it was better not to leave loose ends. I still felt stunned. I didn't have the strength to argue about anything. As the weeks passed, The calls became more frequent. Questions wrapped in concern. Had I gone to the bank yet? Did I know exactly what was in my name? Did I feel lonely? Every sentence carried a hidden suggestion, every suggestion a rush. One afternoon, going through an old box, I found Robert's notebook, the one marked Future. It was full of notes, dates, names. On the last page, he had written a name and a number. A lawyer. His lawyer. The same one who had helped us with the will years ago. I felt a knot in my stomach, as if Robert were speaking to me from that yellowed paper. I called. They treated me with respect. They told me everything was clear, that I was the heir, that I had no obligation to sign anything outside of what was established. They recommended caution. They recommended time. When I told Jessica I had spoken to a lawyer, her tone changed. It was no longer sweet. It was firm, almost annoyed. "We don't want lawsuits," she told me. "This is a family matter." That's when I understood something that hurt to accept. For her, family meant control. It meant deciding for me. It meant that my silence was more valuable than my peace of mind. I returned to the present, to the overly clean table, to the open binder in front of me. Jessica was watching me, waiting for me to yield. Mr. Henderson had his fingers ready to point out where to sign. Michael remained silent, trapped between the woman he chose and the mother who raised him. I took a deep breath. I thought of Robert, of his notebook, of his voice. I wasn't alone. I never had been. And now, on the other side of that closed door, someone was waiting for the signal to enter. The silence at the table became thick, almost sticky. Jessica crossed her arms impatiently, as if my pause were a lack of respect. Mr. Henderson checked his watch. Michael avoided looking at me. I, on the other hand, felt a strange calm, the kind that arrives just before making a decision from which there is no turning back. While I waited, my mind went back to the recent past again, to the days following Robert's death, days in which I learned by force that grief doesn't always come alone. Sometimes it arrives accompanied by bills, false smiles, and people who believe sadness makes you weak. After the funeral, I returned to the house alone. For the first time in decades, the sound of the door closing wasn't followed by Robert's voice asking if I wanted coffee. I sat at the dining table with a cup between my hands and looked around. Everything was the same, the paintings, the books, the wall clock, but something had broken in the silence. Jessica started visiting me more often. She brought bread, flowers, pretty words. She would sit across from me and ask how I felt. I told her the truth. Confused, sad. She would nod with her head tilted, like someone listening with patience. Then, without fail, the subject would change. "We have to think about the kids," she'd say. "Robert would have wanted that." Every time she pronounced my husband's name, something inside me shrank. Not because I didn't want to remember him, but because I felt they were using him as an argument, as if his absence were a tool. One afternoon, she brought me some papers just to look over. They weren't as clear as the ones in the restaurant, but they already spoke of sharing, of reorganizing, of facilitating things. I left them on the table and didn't touch them. That night, I called Robert's lawyer. She explained calmly that no one could force me to sign anything, that any pressure should be taken seriously. She asked me to write everything down, to keep messages, emails, call logs. I started doing it without telling anyone. A small notebook hidden in the drawer where I kept the good napkins. Dates, times, exact phrases. At first, I felt ridiculous, as if I were exaggerating, but then, rereading it, I saw a pattern. Always the same idea: urgency, guilt, fear. When Jessica realized I wasn't moving as fast as she hoped, she stopped coming as often. The calls became shorter, more direct. "This could get ugly," she told me one night, "and I don't want that for you." That phrase stuck with me. For you. She didn't say for us. She didn't say for the family. It was a warning wrapped in concern. I snapped back to the present when Jessica cleared her throat. "Mom, we don't have all day," she said. "We just want you to be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I replied. Mr. Henderson intervened with a professional voice. "Ma'am, refusing to sign could lead to a long, costly, public process. I don't think you want to expose your private life." Expose. Another key word. Shame. Fear. They looked at me, expecting that to break me. I thought about my age, about how many people assume an older woman prefers to avoid conflict at all costs, that she will sign just to go home in peace. They didn't know me as well as they thought. I took the binder and closed it carefully. I slid it back toward the center of the table. "I'm not going to sign today," I said. "Nor tomorrow." Jessica pressed her lips together. "Then we'll have to take other measures." "Do what you have to do," I replied. "So will I." It was then that my phone vibrated softly on the table. A short message, 2 words, "I'm coming." I felt a slight tremor in my hands, but not from fear, from anticipation. Jessica noticed the movement. "Expecting someone?" she asked with a smile that was no longer kind. "Yes." I didn't add anything else. I didn't need to. The silence fell again, this time more tense. Michael looked at me finally, eyes wide, as if he just realized something was slipping out of his hands. "Mom," he whispered. I looked at him with tenderness. I saw the boy he was, the man who now doubted. "It's okay," I told him. "Everything is going to be clear." A few seconds later, footsteps were heard on the other side of the door firm. Sure, the kind of steps that don't hesitate. Mr. Henderson shifted in his uncomfortable seat. Jessica frowned. The door opened again. This time it wasn't the hostess. The woman who entered the room didn't raise her voice or make an exaggerated gesture. She didn't need to. She wore a simple navy blue suit, perfectly pressed, and carried a briefcase under her arm. Her graying hair was pulled back neatly, and she walked with that quiet confidence only people who know exactly why they are there possess. "Good afternoon," she said. "Apologies for the interruption." Jessica froze. Mr. Henderson was the first to react. "Who are you?" he asked with a tone that attempted authority. The woman looked at me first, seeking confirmation. I nodded. "I am Catherine Walsh, attorney at law," she responded. "I am this lady's counsel. And I was also Robert's attorney for many years." The name dropped like a stone in water. I saw Jessica blink, surprised, and Michael straighten in his chair. Mr. Henderson frowned and opened his mouth to say something, but Catherine continued with imperturbable calm. "I was informed that an attempt was being made here to sign an agreement regarding the late Robert's estate without the due legal representation of the heir." She placed her briefcase on the table with care and sat next to me without asking permission. The gesture was simple, but powerful. I was no longer alone facing them. I was no longer an older woman facing a table full of hidden intentions. "This is a family meeting," Jessica said, recovering her composure. "I don't see why." "Because when there are legal documents and lawyers present," Catherine interrupted her, "it stops being just a family meeting." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "With all due respect, counselor, we are exploring options. Nothing has been signed yet." "Precisely," Catherine replied, "and I'm glad I arrived in time." She opened her briefcase and took out several documents. I recognized some immediately. Copies of the will, notary records, dates, stamps, everything Robert had prepared with patience. "Robert's will was probated and validated," she continued. "It clearly establishes that his wife is the sole beneficiary of his personal assets. Any attempt at redistribution requires her free, informed consent, without pressure." She looked directly at Jessica. "And pressuring a person to sign under threat can invalidate any agreement." The silence became dense. Jessica clasped her hands tightly. Michael looked at the papers, confused. "This isn't pressure," Jessica said. "We're just thinking about the future of the family." Catherine tilted her head, including threats of lawsuits, public exposure, and family isolation. Jessica opened her mouth but didn't answer. Mr. Henderson lowered his gaze to his notes. "For the first time since I entered the room, I felt the balance tipping. Furthermore," Catherine added, "any future conversation must go through the appropriate legal channels, not in restaurants, not in informal meetings." She turned to me. "Do you wish to continue this conversation today?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I've already said everything I had to say." Jessica rose slightly from her chair. "This doesn't end here," she warned, her voice tense. "You can't stop us from seeking what is fair." Catherine closed her briefcase softly. "Seeking justice and exercising coercion are not the same thing," she replied. "But you are within your rights to consult whomever you wish. From now on, any communication must go through my office." We stood up. I felt my legs firm, anchored to the floor. We walked past them without looking back. Leaving the private room, the noise of the restaurant returned all at once: dishes, laughter, conversations oblivious to our silent battle. We walked together to the exit. Outside, the air hit my face as a reminder that the world kept turning. "Thank you," I told Catherine. "You arrived just in time." She smiled barely. "I arrived when I had to arrive." We said goodbye with a handshake. I got into my car and sat for a few seconds with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing. I didn't feel complete relief. I knew this wasn't over. Jessica wasn't one to accept a no without trying another move. And I wasn't wrong. The following days were quiet in appearance, too quiet. No calls, no text messages. I thought for a moment that perhaps Catherine's presence had put a definitive stop to it. But one morning, checking the mail, I found a letter I didn't recognize, a notice from the bank, something about unusual activity. My stomach clenched. I called immediately. They told me someone had tried to access one of my accounts with incomplete information. Nothing had been finalized, but it was better to change passwords and review authorizations. I hung up with cold hands. I thought of Jessica, of her warning, of her look. That night I reviewed every document, every power of attorney, every signature. Catherine was right. When they can't move your heart, they try to move your money. And this time it wasn't just about protecting an inheritance. It was about protecting my name. I didn't sleep well that night. Every noise in the house woke me up, as if suddenly the silence had become suspicious. I got up before dawn and made coffee the same as always, but it tasted different. Bitter. I sat at the table where Robert and I had spent so many mornings reading the newspaper in silence, and I opened my notebook. The one for notes, the one I never thought I'd need. I wrote down the bank incident, the time, the name of the person who assisted me, the exact words used: attempted unauthorized access. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. It wasn't paranoia. It was prudence. I called Catherine as soon as the clock struck 9. She answered on the second ring. It started, I told her, point blank. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She gave me clear instructions. Change all passwords, activate two-factor authentication, check if there was any old power of attorney that could be used against me. She spoke to me with the same calm as one explains how to lock a door properly before leaving. That same day we went to the bank together. I saw the teller's demeanor change when Catherine showed her identification. Things moved fast after that. Freezes, alerts, copies of transaction logs. I felt strange, as if I were learning to defend myself in a language I never wanted to speak. Upon leaving, Catherine looked at me seriously. "This is no longer just family pressure," she said. "This is fraud." I nodded. I knew, but hearing it out loud made everything become more real. The following weeks were a mix of tense, calm, and small signals. A neighbor mentioned that a woman had been asking about me, claiming to be family. A missed call from an unknown number. An email that looked official but wasn't quite right. I noted every detail. I shared everything with Catherine. Jessica didn't call me, didn't write. It was as if she had disappeared. But I knew it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. One afternoon, returning from the grocery store, I found Michael sitting in my living room. He hadn't called ahead. He stood up when he saw me, nervous. "Mom," he said. "We need to talk." I invited him to sit, offered coffee. He refused with a gesture. "Jessica is very upset," he started. "She says this is getting out of control." I looked at him with patience. "And what do you think?" He lowered his gaze. "I don't know. I just want everything to be okay again." I felt a pang of sadness. Being okay meant, for him, that I yield, that I sign, that everything continues as before, even if that meant losing my security. "Son," I told him, "being okay is not the same as being quiet." He sighed. "She says you don't trust us." "Trust is not the same as obedience," I replied. "And respect isn't demanded, it's earned." Michael didn't answer. He got up, hugged me awkwardly, and left. I watched him walk away through the window with his shoulders slumped. It hurt, but I didn't waver. 2 days later, the official notification arrived. A petition to contest the will. It wasn't a formal lawsuit yet, but it was the first step. Jessica had decided to take the long road. Catherine smiled when she read it. "This is exactly what I expected." We prepared everything. Documents, records, notes, every attempted contact, every ambiguous message. Everything formed a clear thread, a story they could no longer deny. The hearing was set for a few weeks later. The courthouse building was cold and impersonal, long hallways, hard benches. I sat with Catherine, hands clasped, watching Jessica enter with her lawyer. She was dressed impeccably, smiling little. Michael walked behind her like a shadow. When the review began, everything was orderly, almost boring. Dates, signatures, stamps. Catherine spoke with precision. She explained the pressure, the access attempts, the veiled threats. She presented the notebook. My notebook. I never thought those handwritten pages would be so important. Jessica denied everything. She said it had been a misunderstanding, that they only wanted to help, that I was very sensitive due to the loss. She used soft words, but her tone was cold. Then came the moment she didn't expect. The bank representative presented the log of failed login attempts, dates, times, IP locations. Everything coincided with the days Jessica had disappeared. The silence in the room was absolute. Michael lifted his head slowly and looked at his wife. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The session ended without an immediate verdict, but with a clear warning. Any new attempt would be considered serious, very serious. Upon leaving, Jessica walked past me without looking. Her perfume lingered in the air for a few seconds. Michael stopped. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I didn't know if he was apologizing to me or to himself. I returned home tired, but strangely light. I knew there was still a ways to go, but I also knew something more important. I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, before sleeping, I opened Robert's notebook. I turned the pages carefully. On the last one, beneath the lawyer's name, was a sentence I had never noticed. Calm is also a form of strength. I smiled in the dark. He was right. He always was. The time between one hearing and the next stretched like a taut wire. Nothing visible happened, but I felt everything settling beneath the surface, like tectonic plates before a quake. I continued with my routine. I went to the market on Thursdays, watered the plants in the morning, talked to my neighbor about the weather. From the outside, my life looked exactly the same. On the inside, every day was an exercise in awareness. Catherine asked me not to respond to any direct contact attempts. Everything had to go through her. I obeyed. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something Robert always repeated. When someone insists on speaking off the record, it's because the record doesn't suit them. Even so, the attempts continued. They arrived in subtler forms. A distant cousin called to see how I was doing. An acquaintance from church commented that she had heard rumors about money troubles. Nothing concrete. All designed to make me uncomfortable, to make me feel watched. One afternoon I found an envelope under the door. It had no return address. Inside was a blurry copy of an old document, one Robert and I had signed years ago when Michael was young. A limited power of attorney that was no longer valid, but that someone was trying to use as a silent threat. I felt rage, but also clarity. It wasn't about convincing me anymore. It was about wearing me down. I called Catherine immediately. She asked me not to touch anything else and to put the envelope in a bag. She came by the house that same night. "This confirms what we already knew," she said, reviewing the paper. "They are looking for cracks." "I'm not going to yield," I replied, "but I'm tired." Catherine looked at me intently. "Getting tired isn't losing," she said. "Losing is signing because of exhaustion." I nodded. She was right. I thought of all the women my age who had signed things they didn't understand just to avoid conflict. I thought of how many times we were taught to be reasonable, even when something was being taken from us. The next hearing was more direct. This time, the judge didn't just review the will, but also the subsequent attempts to access my accounts and documents. The judge listened attentively. Catherine presented everything with almost surgical order. I testified with a steady voice, although my chest felt tight. When asked how I had felt during those months, I told the truth, like I was being slowly pushed into a corner. I responded not with shouts, but with silences. Jessica spoke too. She said she never had bad intentions, that everything had been misinterpreted, that I was exaggerating. Then the judge asked her a simple question. "Why didn't you go through legal channels from the beginning?" Jessica hesitated. Her lawyer intervened, but it was too late. That hesitation said it all. Days later, the resolution arrived. It wasn't a scandal, there were no spectacular punishments, but it was something more effective. The judge confirmed the validity of the will. rejected any attempt at forced redistribution, and issued a clear order: no direct contact with me, no management of my assets without legal representation, no veiled insinuations. Furthermore, he recommended that any old document be officially invalidated to avoid misuse. He closed doors, he blocked paths. When Catherine gave me the news, I felt a weight fall from my shoulders. It wasn't joy, it was rest. Michael called me that night, not to talk about papers but to talk about us. "Mom," he said, "I didn't know how to see you." I stayed silent for a few seconds. "Learning to see also hurts," I replied, "but it's never too late." We didn't talk much more. We didn't need to. Some conversations don't fix everything, but they open space. I never exchanged another word with Jessica. Her absence became definitive. The rumors died down little by little. People always find something new to talk about. I went back to walking without looking over my shoulder. I went back to sleeping without starting awake. One morning I sat in the garden with Robert's notebook and read that phrase again. Calm is also a form of strength. I understood that I hadn't won a battle against my daughter-in-law. I had won something more important: the right not to be pushed. The right to say no without guilt. Sometimes, protecting what is yours doesn't make you hard, it makes you honest. And no one can sign that for you. The morning everything was officially closed, I woke up before the alarm rang, not from anxiety, but from habit. I opened the bedroom window and let the fresh air in. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and something harder to name: tranquility. Catherine had called me the night before to confirm that there were no outstanding appeals, that the resolution was final. She told me with the same serene voice she always used, but this time I noticed a different nuance: satisfaction. Professional, yes, but also respect. As if deep down she knew that this story wasn't just another file. I sat at the dining table with Robert's notebook in front of me. I opened it for the last time slowly, like opening a photo album. I turned the pages full of numbers, dates, small notes written in his neat handwriting. Every stroke was a memory, every figure a decision made thinking of protection, not accumulation. I thought about everything that had happened since that family reunion at the restaurant, about how easy it would have been to sign, about how tired I was that day, about how lonely I felt seeing my son silent, trapped between two loyalties. Signing would have ended everything, at least on the surface, but it would have also ended me. Sometimes we believe that peace is bought by yielding, that staying quiet is the same as being generous, that avoiding conflict is a virtue. I believed it myself for many years. I was raised that way. Many women of my generation were taught not to inconvenience others, not to ask too many questions, to trust. Trust wasn't the mistake. The mistake was thinking that trust requires giving up on oneself. Michael came to see me that weekend. He arrived without calling, like when he was young. He brought pastries and a different expression. He sat across from me, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't seem to be in a rush. "I've thought a lot," he told me. "About Dad, about you, about everything." I nodded, let him speak. "I didn't know how to set boundaries," he continued. "I thought avoiding conflict was the right thing to do, but now I understand it was also a way of leaving you alone." I didn't interrupt him. I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before: responsibility. "I didn't ask you to choose," I replied. "Just not to hide." He stayed silent. Then he took my hand like when he was a child. "I want to learn to do better," I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because that desire was a start. I heard no more of Jessica. Her name stopped appearing in conversations, in rumors, in indirect messages. Sometimes, passing a mirror, I wondered if she ever stopped to think about what she tried to do, if she understood that not everything is won by pressure. I don't know. And I learned that I don't need to know. What I do know is this: fear feeds on silence, and silence breaks when someone decides to speak with calm. Today my life isn't very different from what it was before. I still go to the market on Thursdays, still water the plants in the morning. I still keep receipts in envelopes, as Robert taught me. But something changed inside. I walk taller, I breathe deeper, I say no without justifying myself so much. If you are listening to this story and feel a knot in your stomach, if someone close to you is asking nicely for something that doesn't seem fair to you, I want you to know something. Protecting what is yours doesn't make you a bad mother, a bad mother-in-law, or a bad person. It makes you someone who is aware, Family isn't proven with forced signatures or threats wrapped in affection. It is proven with respect, with boundaries, with the capacity to accept a no. If this story made you think of someone, of a situation you lived through or are living through, I would like to read your thoughts. Tell me in the comments which part touched you the most and where you are listening from. Here, we share stories every day, mature, real stories, with emotion that doesn't seek revenge, but justice. If you want to continue accompanying us on this path, subscribe so you don't miss any story like this one. Sometimes listening to the right story at the right moment can change more than we imagine. Thank you for being here. Let's move forward together. M.